views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to a paranormal show unlike any other. The Ghost Helper Show with your guides, Tina Irwin and Laura Van Tyne.
Where the paranormal is more normal than you think.
We are seasoned psychics who once led normal, everyday lives just like you. Until the paranormal world refused to be ignored any longer.
We have listened to countless dead tell their stories, and we are sharing that knowledge with you. Join us each week as we take a piece of the paranormal and explain how it works using true ghost stories, the tales that the dead have told us.
Our intention is to offer new insights and understandings of the paranormal pandemonium which surrounds that mystical fourth dimension and how it impacts our normal everyday lives. The Ghost Helper Show with Laura and Tina, teaching the living to help the dead, starts now. Welcome, everyone. I'm Tina Irwin. I'm here with my co-host, Laura Van Tyne, and we're almost at Halloween next week.
I know, right?
Right. So we decided that we were going to talk about possession today. But first, we want to remind everyone that the paranormal is far more normal than anyone thinks. And it happens every day. Paranormal stuff is happening all around us. And our job is to explain it in a logical way.
Well, you know, and I'm doing research for the show.
We actually research what we talk about.
I type up possession, and all I'm getting is drug possession.
Oh my gosh, that's really bad.
That's the wrong kind of possession. So,
but actually, it is a possession form.
It is.
We're going to get into.
Yeah, it is a form of possession. So, anyways, it's funny how you expect to find something that you're looking for on a Google search, but it's a little bit different. So, anyways,
shout out.
All right, so we want to thank a couple of Facebook groups for showing our show, the Paranormal Ghosts and Entities show, and thank you guys so much for sharing this with us. We appreciate it. And wow, what is possession, Tina?
There are a couple
other than 9/10 of the law.
9/10 of the law. Well, that's a good point. Possession in the paranormal sense is when a human being who's living in the third dimension in ordinary life feels like something or someone else simply steps into them and takes over their life. And the vast majority of possession is a person who's died and is a soul tries to possess a living person. Now there is demonic possession, but that's so rare as to defy belief. But how common is this?
Well, it's really common because nobody crosses over the dead. So you've got a lot of dead lingering, basically looking for a body. If you've got a ghost who was an alcoholic in life, they're going to be an alcoholic in death. We're going to get into that. So it's usually a soul who has died that refuses to acknowledge their death or doesn't know how to cross over. They're looking for help. And what we found kind of interesting in doing some of this research is that the Catholic Church over the past year and a half has had an exponential amount of requests for exorcisms.
What's exponential? Try 500,000 requests for exorcisms.
Just in the country of Italy.
Just Italy. That's a little bit scary. I mean, it's a really cool country, so how can there be that much? Of course, they've had dead for thousands and thousands of years, so maybe not too surprising. And 500,000 requests for exorcism. So they can't train their exorcists fast enough. And the problem with all that is that it doesn't work.
Well, the problem is that if you have an issue, a lot of times the person that you hire, the psychic, the religion expert, or whatever it is, they simply banish the entity, or they will quote unquote bury them in the ground. It doesn't solve the problem.
You can bury a ghost.
Oh, we've heard it all. Okay. We heard this one woman who said that they used spaghetti noodles and bathrobe ties. And I'm like, what? So anyways, there's a lot of weird stuff out there.
Or they throw holy water on them, which if you're a ghost, holy water is never going to touch you.
No. And so looking at this, only by crossing over the dead can we solve this problem of possession and all of these other paranormal problems. When somebody has an exorcism, they take this entity out of the living person's body, and then what do they do with it? It becomes someone else's property. This is a
And
problem. And problem. Sorry.
Exactly. So what's it like when something comes in, a person, let's say a ghost, comes in to possess you? And this happened to me because weird stuff happens every day, right? And
Yes.
so this story is actually in Ghost Stories from the Ghost Point of View, Volume 3. It's one of the very first stories. And this took place a very long time ago, back in the dark ages of my psychic ability. And I was newly married, and we're living in officer housing on Submarine Base, New London. And my husband was actually not at sea at this moment, for which I was truly grateful. And we're outside planting chrysanthemums. I'm planting, he's talking. And in the cartoons where this dark cloud comes over you, well, I felt this dark cloud come over me. And it's like, what has come over me? That's how it feels. And I don't drink, so I'm cold sober. And no idea what this is, but this feeling of sadness, of grief is just crushing, and it's just crashing in on me. Like someone goes, click, you're happy. Click, now you're sad. Unhappy, happy, sad. It's going, what is this? And it gets worse and worse and more intense. And I said, oh my God, Troy, somebody died. And he said, what does that mean? What do we do? Work with me here. I've been at sea a long time. What does this mean? And I said, I don't know, but I know. So I called my family and nobody died. I didn't know anyone who died. How can this possibly happen? And the evening went on, and I'm feeling worse and worse. We called one of the chaplains, who happened to be a Catholic chaplain, and he said, did you see The Exorcist? And I said, no, I've never seen the film. And to this day, I've never seen the film. And he said, well, I can't help you, and hung up on us. Yeah, that's why I'm not a fan of the Catholic Church. Not politically correct. I don't care. Okay, so continuing along here. Oh no, I'm just getting animated. You're gonna have to chain me down, girlfriend.
All right, I'm going to get some duct tape for next week's show.
So what happened was, as I'm going along, it's getting worse and worse. And my husband, being the helpful person, says, why don't you make supper? Because surely cooking is going to help this ghost. Only I didn't know it was a ghost at the time. And since I couldn't come up with another reason, I decided I'd go in and I'd cook something. And he asked me a question. I turned to look at him, and he stepped back and almost fell backward. He said, oh my God, there's the face I'm looking at isn't your face anymore. I don't recognize this woman. I thought, okay, Houston, we have a huge problem.
Because you're not feeling good this whole time.
I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling cold and terrified and grieving, and I can't understand what's happening to me. And as time goes on, this face crosses mine over and over. And I did cook something, but I couldn't eat it. And I'm now so terrified I won't look in a mirror. I won't let Troy out of my sight, what gets to be a little awkward at times. So it gets really bad. And I said, there is a woman who's trying to take over my life. She died, and she doesn't want to accept her death. And I don't know how to get rid of her. Remember, this is in the 70s.
And I guess
I don't want to say how early 70s, but it's in the 70s. And he's going, what do I do? What do I do? I'm an officer. I fix things. I'm a guy. And it's like, dude, if I knew how to fix this, by God, I would fix this.
Well, and why did she pick you, I guess, is the next question.
Well, I pondered that for a lot of years. And the answer that I came up with was, we were in resonance with each other on some level. And that level was, she looked very much like me, short, brown hair, green eyes, whatever. And we were almost the identical age, and we were so close in frequency that she decided she was angry that she died. She died in a traffic accident. I could hear that in her thoughts. I couldn't find it in a newspaper, but I know she died in a traffic accident. And I know that she was angry that she died. She wasn't supposed to die that way. She was so angry, and what about her family and people she loved, and her rage was just huge, and it was terrifying to me. And and I'm getting worse and worse and worse. And now I'm shaking. And my husband said, I have an idea. Because remember, long ago in those dark ages, I had no idea how to cross over the dead. And that's important because I had to learn it. And that's why we share so much with all of you. And so he runs upstairs and he comes back downstairs and he kind of gathers me up, puts his arms around me, puts me in his lap, and he cuddles me. This is so sweet. Wasn't that so sweet? And he starts reading the 23rd Psalm because he didn't know what else to do. And we're not religious people, but he read it over and over and over. I don't know how many times he read it. And I could feel her grip loosen and she began to let go of me. And we like to think she crossed over, but I couldn't see her. I only knew when she left my body. And it was just terrifying, but I wasn't going to give in to her. She was a really powerful person. And I made up my mind that I would be a really powerful person and not let this ever happen. And as a postscript to, as you would say, if you were Adeline Moore, I read a Reader's Digest article several months later that talked about this guy had the same identical experience and he didn't know how to get rid of the possessing soul either. And I made up my mind then and there that at some point I was going to figure out how I do this because Troy spent 42 years at sea. Not that I knew that was going to happen, but because I knew that this could happen to me again, and this time I might be alone. So I had to come up with a better solution.
And we're sharing these stories because it's helpful. We're not the only ones that have had these things happen to us.
I'm a naval officer, for God's sake. I was just an ensign. But
still,
those things aren't supposed to happen to logical left brain thinking people.
Right.
But I have this odd brain that works left and right.
Speaking of, odd brains, when we come back, I'm going to talk about as a parent, what happens. I had this probably one of the most terrifying moments of my parenting life.
I had a lot of them.
Yeah, I did. With the paranormal. And what happens when my daughter told me how she popped this man out of her. So when we come back, you are listening.
That sounds bad.
I know, right? Oh,
Okay.
that did sound bad. Ooh.
Yeah, that sounds really bad.
That. Okay.
When we come back, Laura's going to share her paranormal experience when her daughter had an attempted possession.
That sounds good.
Yes. I'm a constant editor. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Ghost Helpers on Transformation Talk Radio. And after we have tried to recover from Laura's unfortunate faux pas and her terminology.
She laughed the whole break.
I did. It's just screamingly funny, unfortunately. Laura is now going to carefully share the story of an attempted possession of her daughter.
So, and we're
thoughtfully.
Thanks, Tina.
Thoughtfully.
So, we're sharing these stories because we're pretty much normal people.
Yeah, tell my husband that.
Yeah. But we're sharing these because, what does it look like? We hear about possession all the time. What does it look like? And this is one case where, oh my gosh. Okay, first of all, this is back in the day. We call it BT, before Tina. Sorry. And we're not sleeping and all of this crazy stuff is going on. We've got this 3-headed crocodile roaming around the house that's, only my daughter and the animals can see. We've got all these ghosts popping in and out, and not ghosts, things that are not ghosts that are kind of even scarier. And, I haven't slept in months. Like 2 consecutive hours of sleep a night was like a win. And I spent a lot of my time sleeping in my daughter's bed to be with her, to protect her, because it was just that nuts, or she would come into our bed. So I'm tired and we've got to be normal. Okay. We live a normal life. My husband's a businessman. I'm a school teacher. I do volunteer work at the city level.
Yeah, sweetie, you try to convince you or me.
Right. So, and as I'm working with my daughter, it's about how do I keep this family secret? Okay. She's a kid. Kids talk. What she thinks is normal is really not so normal. and I'm making lunches for the girls and my husband and getting everybody ready. And whenever my daughter would come out with a room, or whenever she'd say "mom" in 2 syllables, I knew something not normal was up. That was like the canary in the coal mine. She goes, "Mom, mom, 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 mom." And she comes running out. She goes, "This bad spirit man came into my room and he tells me that he's going to take over my body because he's going to get me to do all kinds of naughty things." And he said, he entered my body right here. And she's pointing to her solar plexus. And that's a lot of times where we get our information in and out from, is our solar plexus. And she is so excited because she says, "And I just popped him right out. I told him this was my body and you can't have it. And I just went bam, bam, and he went off." And all I could think of was, first of all, I literally got weak in the knees because I knew that this was an attempted possession, and we are fighting for our family's soul and our family's spiritual survival with this. And what I realized was, had that have happened in my presence, would I have stopped her from doing what she somehow innately knew how to do? I think that's a really fair question.
Well, it is a fair question. And she pops him out, but she didn't cross him over. She got rid of him so he couldn't possess her, but he's still out there trying to manipulate, because that's what some of the possession is. And I think we need to go into that a little bit more. If you have a soul who wants to use you as the puppet on a lonely string, and if that's what you want to do, from a Coldplay song, and then you have to know, how do you take your power back and separate yourself not only from that soul, but cross that soul over. And I noticed that we do have a question from Facebook. Someone says that they've been trying to get rid of a possessing soul for quite a while now. And bluntly, on the Ghost Helpers website, we have a crossing over prayer. Use that prayer over and over and over in a forceful voice, or use the video, or play the video over and over and over.
And that's a really good start, because the idea of this show is to help you take your power back in these paranormal situations. Burning sage and shedding some white light on your stuff is not going to fix the problem. We need to cross the soul over. If it's a human soul or a dark entity, they need to be crossed over. In our physical third dimensional world, where we can see, touch, feel, and everything is tangible, we have police officers, we have judges, we have all of these law enforcement tools here. Why is it that that fourth dimension remains unchecked?
Well, that's why we put together the course. We call it psychic self-defense. Some people call it psychic development. It doesn't matter. It gives you the tools to stop these things from happening. You can definitely use the crossing over prayer video, but wouldn't you like to know more? This has happened to you. You really need some pretty sophisticated tools.
Crossing over prayer video is great for a ghostly soul, but if it's another thing, it may not be as effective. That's just,
And we have ways to contact us, and we do help with that.
And I'm looking at my daughter that morning, and I'm like, "Oh, that's nice, honey." I mean, what do you say?
What do you say?
Said, "You know what? Let's keep this between us. Here's your lunch, and let's all of us go get in the car." And I dropped them off to school, and it was one of those low points in my life, because I knew I had to figure this out. I knew that my kids' entire life and safety and well-being was in the balance there. I mean, I had one chance to get it right. I felt I had to keep searching and searching and searching, looking for that right help. I knew what was not working. And if it didn't work, I dropped it and I moved on to the next thing, because it was really a part of my learning process. Had I have figured it out right away, we wouldn't be here having this conversation.
And the goal really is to blow away the smoke and mirrors and say, this stuff really happens because energy is neither created nor destroyed. So if someone dies and the energy that animates them has to continue. It's a law of physics. It's a law of thermodynamics. So anybody who says, "Oh, I don't believe in ghosts," wake up to the 21st century. It's science. It's not something you can imagine. It's been going on for a really long time. And actually there are a couple very interesting concepts that go with this. And one of them is multiple personality disorder. And I want to take a minute and talk about this, because let's look at there was a movie that came out in 2001 called A Beautiful Mind, about the master mathematician and Nobel Prize winner, John Nash. And he was played by Russell Crowe, and his wife was played by Jennifer Connelly. It was a really outstanding film. But he had 3 ghosts who were possessing him, and he could hear those voices all the time. How would his life have been different if someone had said, "Oh, we can just cross those ghosts over"? Oh my gosh, what a concept. Doesn't have to be as hard as people are making it.
Would have made for a really short movie.
But look at how it might have helped other
Yes.
people.
And this is based on a true story.
It's
so,
based on a
yes.
true story. And at the end of the film, yes, I'm giving it away. You can see the 3 ghosts who are with him. So obviously somebody knows that he's got ghosts with him. They don't know how to cross them over. And believe me, the Catholic Church isn't going to help you, nor are the Mormons. You might, quote, banish them, and then they come back 5 minutes later.
Well, or what's even more scary, in my family's situation, banishing them, in my mind's eye, meant that they would become somebody else's problem, or they would come back, and they can come back even angrier. So banishing them, there was a spiritual responsibility here of banishing them means they're someone else's problem, and that's just not cool. It's no different than letting a known rapist or pedophile free. Seriously. We're looking at the 3rd dimension.
Well, but they may very well be that person.
Right.
And they want to continue to abuse even in death. That's a really revolutionary concept. You have a soul who's a pedophile or a murderer or a serial killer in life. They don't stop doing that or wanting to do those things in death.
Here, what I've learned is that if you're a jerk in life, you're a jerk in death. If you're a lovely person in life, you're a lovely person in death. What animates that personality is keeps going. It doesn't change just
Your
because
frequency
death
doesn't change at death. Who you have been is who you will continue to be.
And we have crossed over some really nasty murderers. Now, and what we get is they don't deserve to go to heaven, or they don't deserve this or that. Well,
that's not up to us.
It's not up to us to judge, but I'm going to be willing to bet that they're not going to go to the same location in that heaven world as Mother Teresa.
Well, exactly, because in our Father's house, there are many mansions, and the karma of what that soul has done isn't erased at death. It is not erased when they cross over. Our job is to get them out of the 4th dimension so they don't keep trying to possess the living. If you think about this,
the living.
Thank you. Or going into a weak person and getting them to commit murder, pedophile actions, or harassment of any kind. People who are stalking you in life, they stalk you in death. You need to get them crossed over.
Yes. And we're going to take another break here in a moment. Check out theoillounge.com. We want to thank them for sponsoring this show. You are listening to Ghost Helpers on Transformation Talk Radio. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a person that actually, I think it was your client. Sometimes we get these mixed up, who had a stillborn baby who basically stayed with them and haunted them throughout their life. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that story, because this is also another common element. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to Ghost Helpers. And we are talking about possession today. And we talked about the experience that Tina had when she was in the Navy. And we talked about an issue that we had with my daughter early on. And we're going to talk about a third thing, but what we talked about, the crossing over prayer. I want to kind of segue into this first. The crossing over prayer really does help. It helps remove things, but what you also want to do is you want to learn how to raise your frequency so you're not necessarily that ghost magnet or that magnet for dark entity. The higher we can raise our frequency, it means like it's a shields up, so it helps to protect us. And we have a book called Karma and Frequency that will give you a bunch of different ideas and ways to do that, along with the psychic self-defense class, which also that book does come in with the kit that goes with that class. All right. So Tina, you had a client who had a stillborn baby, or she had twins.
Well, I had a client who had 2 issues. First time she came to see me, she said, I feel like all of a sudden I'm so obsessive compulsive. And I have to do the same repeating action and it's going nuts. And so she said, what can you do? And I quickly located the ghost, crossed the ghost over really quickly. And someone went click and she had no more obsessive compulsive disorder.
Was it like an OCD ghost?
It was an OCD ghost.
Okay.
I don't know how the guy died. And remember, a male can possess a female can possess a male. As long as it's a living person, the ghost doesn't care. And so she felt immediately better. So a couple months later, she came back and she said, I've had this issue, since my daughter was born. And she goes on and on about this child. To make a long story short, the last child she had was a daughter. And throughout the pregnancy, she felt like she was having twins, but they never found a second heartbeat. So she gives birth. And during that time, she wasn't awake when it happened. And so afterwards, they handed her a little girl and she said, where's the other child? And they said, well, don't worry about it. There's no other child. And she felt her daughter was 26 when we had this conversation. She felt like there was another child and she felt like this other child was still there somehow. And she felt she couldn't grieve it because she wasn't, no matter how much she begged, she asked for her medical records and it's like they wouldn't allow her to see her medical records or they lost them somehow. She was never allowed to know that there was a second child. And so I said, well, there is a second child and I can see her. Let's cross her over. So we did. And this grief immediately left her. In the meantime, she contacted her grown daughter who said, oh, I've always known I had a twin. I've known she sort of was with me sometimes and I didn't know where else she went. And apparently she went back to the mom.
Did she ever have the conversation, the mom of the living daughter ever had?
No, they never had the conversation. The daughter just knew she had this twin soul with her. And once that soul was crossed over, she felt this huge weight lift from her. And it was just a really sweet, simple process. And then I suggested that the mother and the daughter have a ceremony to honor the child, give the child the name she would have given her. And they went to the beach. They said how much they loved her. And then the next thing they know, they both felt even better. They were able to honor their reality because they weren't crazy. They didn't imagine what they were feeling. I think that's really, really important.
And I had a client of a similar situation, and it was a husband and wife team. And her complaint was, and she came to me basically for a marriage type counseling. And she came and her husband kept changing personalities. One minute he's this great guy, the next minute he's this, and he had these hoarding tendencies, and she never knew which husband she would come home with every night.
I bet you she's not the only one who's had that experience.
And I said, you know what? And they're both very sensitive. So they're rather psychic. They're sensitive. I said, go home, use this crossing over prayer. And by the way, if you go to ghosthelpers.com, you can find the crossing over prayers there, ghosthelpers.com, and they're free. And they are there for anyone to use because the idea is to help these souls cross over. It helps the living and it helps the dead.
It's our public service.
And she goes home and she has the crossing over prayer card and they read it over and over and over. And then she's telling me the story afterwards. She goes, the craziest thing happened. We saw this entity leave my husband and we got to have a conversation with it. And this being, the soul, was a miscarriage by the husband's mother from years ago that she fully grieved and could never let go. She gets pregnant right away with her, with this living man, the husband. And this soul didn't know what to do. It didn't know where to go. And so it would constantly inhabit his body, and he was never alone. He never felt alone. They cross over this soul, and all of a sudden, in a heartbeat, their marriage is better. He's got an amazing new job that he was hoping for, but they kept putting it off and putting it off, putting it off. And his hoarding tendencies stopped.
Because it wasn't really him. And you can't make this up. Their whole lives changed because of this one little crossing over prayer card, which is, by the way, in the kit that comes with a psychic self-defense course. And they're also available online on Ghost Helpers. It's a simple card, and it is astounding how well it works.
Yeah, there's actually testimonials all over the world for various situations about how well this works. So these are different types of forms of possession. And, did this baby soul, I'm going to call it baby soul, do this to be malicious? Probably not. It just didn't know what to do. It didn't know where to go.
And the hoarding concept, it was holding on. The energy of holding on, I can't let go, I can't let go.
Right.
Translates for a living person many times as hoarding. And not all the time, this is not, oh, that's the answer. In this case, that's what was happening. And I want to talk now about something that's a more classic possession that is happening on a staggering level all over the world. And that is addictions. What causes addiction? When a person drinks alcohol,
and we're talking excesses also.
We're talking excesses. We're not talking about the person that
Has
might have a glass of wine now and then,
Right.
or an occasional beer. But if you have to have, 20 cocktails a night, or you can't go a day without alcohol, and you have to have these drugs, whatever they are, whether they're legal or illegal, quote, legal drugs are now pretty horrific.
Right.
The opioid situation.
We have crossed over so many people who've died from the opioid
It's
issue.
incredible.
It's so sad. These are people that had a normal, healthy life. They had to take a painkiller, and it destroyed them.
We're also talking about people who are also addicted to violence. They're addicted to gambling. And how do we know?
Violent video games.
Violent video games. And what happens is a person who has been addicted to anything, when they die, they're what have been called in ancient times all the way up to today, hungry ghosts. I know that sounds so funny. What are they hungry for? They're not eating souls. They want to still taste alcohol. They want to still feel the high of the drugs. They want to feel the risk of gambling or horse racing or whatever it is. And because of that, they look for a living person with a low frequency, or their auric field is shredded because maybe they were horribly abused. And these possessing souls simply walk right in. And if you walk into a bar, it's why we avoid bars at all costs. And we don't drink. I mean, if you're really psychic, drinking is not going to be your friend. So if you go to those places and you want to drink, you can have up to 60 alcoholics inhabit one body. How do we know this? Is anybody else?
How do we know this?
Because there are two, very famous professionals, Dr. Raymond Moody and Dr. Bruce Goldberg, and actually Dr. Edith Fiore, up in the Los Gatos area, who have identified the number of alcoholics that they have removed from their clients, because they can actually see them. One's I think a board certified psychiatrist, two are board certified psychotherapists. And they have observed this. And they said, we know that this happens, that the reason kicking your addiction is so hard is because the possessing souls, we did not say spirits, the possessing souls don't want you to stop drinking. They want to keep that up.
Well, and if we look at like Hollywood Elite, they have the best in class services to kick addictions. I'm going to give an older
rehab units.
Yeah, I'm going to give an example of Lindsay Lohan, for example. She went in and out of rehab over and over and over. What kept bringing her back to the substance abuse? chances are she had a lot of souls with her that wanted that high.
And as long as they want that high, they're going to push the soul to drink and drink and drink. We're going to take a break. But when we come back, we have a very interesting story from the Russian Revolution, which I think you'll find fascinating. You're listening to Ghost Helpers on Transformation Talk Radio, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Ghost Helpers. We're talking about possession and what it looks like, what can cause it, and what you can do about it, really. And recently, Tina and I worked on a kind of an interesting situation crossing over some dead. You want to share it?
We were crossing over dead, and the next thing we know,
You know, the huge.
yeah, this weird life we live. Laura keeps wanting to convince you that we're normal, ordinary people, but we have some bizarre things happen. And in this particular case, we discovered we had this ghost, and she said her name was Anastasia. Well, the only Anastasia I ever heard of was the youngest daughter of the Romanovs, who were murdered in, 1917?
And we were watching a documentary
On the Romanovs,
which
it's on,
I think that was the impetus.
Well, there's a connection there
Yeah.
for some reason. And
Ghosts travel at the speed of thought. We were thinking of her.
right. And when you basically open a doorway to help the dead, it's a massively bright light in the fourth dimension that can be seen across space that you can't even imagine. And so we said, did you really possess somebody else's body? And we asked her what happened, and she said, well, as I had long believed she did die, but her soul possessed a peasant and just took over. But it was far more than that. She simply couldn't believe she died. She couldn't, and I'm sure the rest of the family couldn't believe it either. Her 4 other sisters and her brother and her parents were shot all at once, and their bodies were pretty badly mutilated. Although Anastasia's body was never found. They did find them eventually, the rest of them. She said she just simply couldn't believe she died. And so she refused death. She just said, I'm not going to be dead. And I said, well, what did you do? And she said, well, I inhabited the body of a young girl, but then she died. So then I found a boy's body and I inhabited his body. And then
she had such a strong personality. She took over these bodies.
She just walked in, took right over. And a peasant would have poor nutrition, probably abused, was probably a pretty easy takeover. Finally, she found a young peasant girl, and it was a pretty sturdy body. So she kept that body. And then she was staying with a family. She was raped. She had a baby, and she left the baby with that family and worked her way back to civilization because she was determined to live a whole life and determined to let the world know that she really was Anastasia, even though DNA was done with Prince Philip of the British royal family, who was one of the closest relatives, and the DNA was not a match. If a possessing soul comes in to take over a person's body, the DNA will never be a match. You can't say, oh, that was Anastasia. They couldn't prove it, but her knowledge was so extensive. A peasant girl would never have known those things. And some people claim she studied and that's how she knew, but it wasn't like, in the 30s and 40s, she had Google.
Right. Or access to a lot of books and literature at that point in time.
She really didn't. And so we asked her, why don't you just keep taking over bodies? And she gave the most interesting answers. And she said, I'm really tired.
And there was another soul who had died that was after her. The guy, what was his name?
Rasputin.
Thank you.
The black magician who was Rasputin, who basically brought down the entire Romanov family and was the impetus for the Russian Revolution.
And he died, and he was in that fourth dimension. Think about this. What happens in our third dimension will also happen in that fourth dimension if we don't cross them over. So, Rasputin was after her also, and she got tired of running. Think about that. It's no different than being stalked in this third world physical dimension aspect that we have. It's really no different. It's just a different dimension. So unless you can cross them over and get that clock to stop ticking.
And she didn't know where to go, what to do. She knew she needed help because Rasputin was such a staggering black magician. And that's a whole nother show, how they work, and courses as well. And that's part of the problem with what's happening in the new age. No one warns you that there are some very dark elements when you're taking these pathways. But Anastasia was telling us how desperately she needed to stay away from Rasputin. She never looked into his eyes. She wanted to avoid him. He had completely taken over her parents and her siblings, but he couldn't take over her. And even in death, she was trying to resist him. And finally, when she was crossed over, she was finally free of him.
And that's a long time of running.
Yeah, it's basically over 100 years.
Yeah. And so one of the best ways to avoid these types of things to happen is to keep your base frequency high. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. One of them is don't go to bars every night. I mean, there's use the logic trail. Violent video games will bring down your frequency. The higher you can raise your frequency, when life traumas and dramas hit us, our baseline is higher. So that way we're still strong and we can still fend things off. And it's a really important concept. And, we have this class called Psychic Self-Defense. And Tina and I were actually mulling this over the weekend. The people, it's been a great class and we've got amazing testimonials, but we're like, is that the right title for it? Does that title sound scary, I guess, Tina? That's the big question.
People like to feel, they don't want to feel that somehow they need to be protected. It's like, you haven't really looked into this realm. What we are looking for are a better title for it. It could be psychic self-development. We're looking for other ways to describe it, but basically it teaches you how to raise your frequency. It explains how to understand the things that happen in the third and the fourth dimension
and how they're related,
and how things can affect you in positive and detrimental ways, and what you can do as you move forward on your spiritual path to feel strong. How would you name that course? We'd love to get feedback from all of you.
Yeah, if you have some thoughts or ideas, that would be fantastic, because it's a great course, but we just kind of feel like we've named it what it
is. But people say,
it's just not a sexy name.
It's not a sexy name. So, hey, we're going to own that. But we want to give it a name that would make people go, oh my gosh,
If you have any ideas, we'd love to hear from it. We are just like, it's like we're separating the forest from the trees. We're too close to it. So yeah, if you have any ideas, that'd be amazing.
All right. So what are we going to do next week?
Next week is going to be a lot of fun.
So cool.
So next week is actually Halloween. And so we talked about this a lot. And I think what we're going to do, actually, I know what we're going to do. There's no thinking.
I already wrote that episode.
So what we're going to do is we're going to actually share some of our most favorite ghost stories with you that have happened to us that, they're poignant, they're scary, they're a little mix of everything. You're going to share the story of a murder in a BMW where you were asked to look and see what happened to this BMW that broke one day.
Yeah, BMWs don't just seize on the freeway.
They don't seize on the freeway. So what happened? So what you're going to find in that story will be kind of amazing. And I'm going to share with you all it's actually kind of it's a very tragic story about a young woman, a Tinder app, and something that went horribly wrong. And it turned into a disappearance and what happened with that. And it was just one of those heartbreaking moments.
And we'll have more stories. We're not going to give them all away as a preview. And we are also looking for, if you have a paranormal topic, not an individual issue for you personally, but a paranormal topic you'd love to hear about, let us know. We want to thank you for listening to Ghost Helpers on Transformation Talk Radio.
Check out ghosthelpers.com. We got this brand new website we are so excited about. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you can actually write in your own ghost stories or your own experiences at the bottom and submit those, and we'll publish those as well, with or without your name. It's your choice.
Or if you want to ask us a question or have us do an episode about a particular topic, that would be a great place to do that. And you can write to us at, there, or contact@ghosthelpers.com. And we want to thank our sponsors.
Yeah, the oillounge.com. They are full of all kinds of amazing information. It's a team of registered nurses who use essential oils to enhance health and wealth and well-being. So check out the oillounge.com as well.
We want to thank our producers, Benny and Kat, for helping us stay on the straight and narrow as we go along.
And I want to thank Benny and Kat for not laughing too hard at my faux pas.
Yes, that's just because you're human, sweetie.
Okay.
And we want you to be sure to check out our books and courses on ghosthelpers.com and the new website. And gee, I think that's a wrap.
We'll be right back. We'll be back next week.
All right. Bye-bye.